We now welcome New Yorker editor David Remnick, who has written The Bridge, The Life and Rise of Barack Obama. There it is, I was going to hold it up. The book explores how the president navigated his passage from community organizer to the White House through the very tricky byways of Chicago politics, at the same time searching for his identity as an African American. David, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Bill.
First of all, how did you find the time to do this? You've got a couple of full-time jobs. You write and edit The New Yorker.
The New Yorker staff is pretty damn good, so I got a lot of help from them.
Let's reference the title, first of all. What does that mean, The Bridge?
Well, The Bridge is a metaphor for obvious reasons, the first African-American president, but also it's a book that begins at the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, 1965, the scene of one of the great horrible scenes of violence, and then a great moment of triumph where there's a march in support of voting rights from Selma to Montgomery. And Obama went there just after announcing for the presidency and spoke directly to the African American community at Brown's Chapel, and a place where Martin Luther King spoke all the time. And he declared his candidacy all over again, only this time he wasn't just running for president, he was running for what he called the head of the Joshua generation, the Moses generation being King, John Lewis, Joe Lowery, all those people. The Joshua generation, you get the metaphor of bringing people into the promised land. I mean, it's a pretty bold metaphor to invite.
And therein lies a big part of his problem identity-wise, doesn't it? He doesn't identify with the civil rights generation of African American leaders.
He's too young.
Yeah.
He's too young. It's a generational problem. It would be...
Or maybe I should say they don't identify with him in many cases.
Well, a lot of them identified much more closely with and were loyal to the Clintons. The Clintons are older. The Clintons had put in their time. Bill Clinton certainly from the South and had a very, very tight relationship with a lot of African American leaders. And when Obama first began to run for president, he did not have the support of a lot of older civil rights generation leaders, including John Lewis, the great congressman from Georgia, one of the real hero figures in our government.
Well,
one of the very few.
So if the question is why another book on Barack Obama, this is...
Well, a real biography. In other words, there has been a memoir,
right,
certainly, and a good one. But a memoir is a story told about oneself, and you leave out what you don't want to include, and I'm not suggesting anything dirty about that. But a biographer does an entirely different thing. There was the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin, and there's Walter Isaacson on Benjamin Franklin, or many, many scholars to come. So it's a very different kind of text, and you find out different things, and there's a lot new in here.
So you concentrate a lot on Obama's political formation, and you write in the Chicago section, which I love, being from Chicago, that he was found insufficiently Chicago and insufficiently black.
He did not have deep roots in Chicago. He came to Chicago after being an undergraduate. And Chicago is not one of those cities that easily brings you into its own mainstream, right? That's one thing. So he has to find a political way while being from outside. That's hard. Number two, he tries to run for Congress eventually in 2000 on the South Side against a former leader of the Black Panthers, Bobby Rush, a very popular congressman in that district. There's no real reason to fire him and throw out the incumbent. And this guy comes in, relatively an outsider, and a terrible and a disgusting whispering campaign begins against him from the Rush forces and from another opponent. And the notion is that he's somehow the candidate of outsiders. He's the candidate of white money and Jewish money. And did you notice that he has a white mother? And all this kind of stuff is brought up. It's very painful for Obama. It's very painful for Obama to win. It's not the only reason he lost. He just had no compelling reason to throw the guy out. That's how incumbents lose in this country.
But you seem to draw the conclusion that that loss was actually a very good thing for him.
It was his political education. He realized that he could not be a black politician of the older sort, in other words, running in majority black districts to be a mayor or to be a congressman. That was the dominant way for older African Americans to enter the political stream of things, whether it was state houses or city halls. He starts traveling in the rest of the state. Illinois is a diverse state, very white in the South, closer in a way in its political culture to the South than it is certainly to the suburbs of Chicago or Chicago itself. He discovers he has a lot of appeal there. He's not going to win the southern part of the state in a Senate race, but he's going to get a lot of votes. He's going to win suburban voters. He's certainly going to get the African American vote once he becomes the sole African American candidate in that Senate race. And that's the coalition he builds to win the Senate race in 2004, and it becomes a model for him nationally.
He also had enormous helpings of sheer good luck, didn't he?
Anybody who gets to the very, very top, whether it's Ronald Reagan, who you've covered, or all the presidents since, somehow has some breaks somewhere along the way, as well as learning from failure. The breaks that were on Obama's side, he benefited from 3 different sex scandals. 3. That's pretty unusual.
And it eliminated 2 in one race.
2 in the 2004 Senate race. His main Democratic opponent goes down when his divorce records are open, and they are not an edifying spectacle. And his main Republican challenger disappears from the race because his divorce records open, and they are not an edifying spectacle. And Obama ends up running against a Republican named Alan Keyes, who was never going to win.
So, how do you think the President Obama today sees race and himself in his position in the racial spectrum?
Well, he knows the historic. He knows very deeply the historic dimension of him being the first African American president. But I think he's very wary of talking about it endlessly. He's certainly wary of pinpointing a so-called black agenda.
So much so that there have been complaints from the Congressional Black Caucus.
Not only the Congressional Black Caucus, but also on the left and in media, people like Tavis Smiley or Cornel West. His view of it, Obama's view of it, is that if he improves the economy, it will immediately help everybody, including African Americans who are disproportionately unemployed and suffering, so many of them, 16% unemployment in the African American community. It's a horrendous statistic.
Sure.
Whereas people who are criticizing him, whether in the Black Caucus or elsewhere, think that he needs to pinpoint these issues much more assertively and have his vocabulary be more about African Americans than it's been. He's very wary to do that.
That's a tightrope to walk, isn't it?
Of the many tightropes he has to walk as president.
What do you think was the most revealing part of his journey? You devoted a lot of pages here to studying how he got where he is. What is there?
There's a lot to the book. It's not a tiny book. It's not a slender book. But take, for example, the figure who's almost absent from his own memoir, who's probably the biggest influence on his life, early life, and it's his mother, a very complex figure, and a woman about whom he has very complex feelings, deep love, deep admiration, but when he was a kid, she was absent when he was in high school. She was off in Indonesia
doing field work
for her career as an anthropologist. It's a very complex story, and she's a very serious woman. She had the image, I felt, during the campaign, maybe you disagree, as a kind of flighty 60s batik skirt wearing woman. She's much more serious than that.
That is
much
the
more
image,
interesting.
the sort of,
for my
conventional wisdom.
For my sins, Bill, I read her 1,000-page doctoral dissertation about the craftsmen of the villages of Java. And just to get a sense of what she was all about, I mean, there's a great deal of her passions and politics right there in her doctoral dissertation, which she finally handed in when she was 50, and then she died a couple of years later.
David Remnick, who has written, I won't call it a biography, I guess.
Call it a biography.
All right.
Why not?
A new book about
It stops at the White House door.
President Obama, the life and rise of Barack Obama, and I can tell you this, I'm a Chicagoan. I've covered Chicago politics all my life, and the Chicago politics part of this is just dead on. So, and I'm sure the rest of it will be too.
I couldn't get a better compliment. Thank you.